Hello, this is Haley Wazinski, the Physician and Program Relations Manager here at Practice Match. Today's webinar is all about CV writing, so we're really going to look at what it takes to create a CV, as well as some examples of what to do in your CV and kind of what to avoid to make sure that your CV isn't standing out in the wrong way. So during the webinar, if you do have any questions, please feel free to throw them in that questions chat box. The phone lines will be muted throughout the session just to help avoid any excess background noise that can sometimes occur during webinars. If you do have a question and you don't want to ask it in that chat box or you want to ask it later on, please feel free to email me at practicepath@practicematch.com. That email will come to me and I can respond to any inquiries there as well. So just to go ahead and get started, the first thing that we're really going to look at is just an overview of what we're going to talk about. So we're going to go over some common CV questions that I've gotten throughout the year, as well as look out the outline of what a CV should consist of, look at a few examples, and then we're also going to go through some different checklists. So some common CV questions that I get. Number one, what is a CV? So a lot of residents and fellows already know that CV is going to be your curriculum vitae. And what that is going to do is that's going to let you put down all of your information that about what makes you a physician, your education information, training, any past experiences that you've had. If you have any research experience. So that CV is just a way that we can tie in everything that we've done so far as a physician and put it all on a piece of paper, and it should be a couple pages, but to put all that information on there so that way as a recruiter or an HR team or anyone else, as they start to kind of look at your CV, they can get a sense of who you are as a physician, what you have accomplished, and maybe even what are some of your goals if you put that into your professional summary. So then that leads us into our next question of how is a CV different than a resume? So I've gotten that question quite a few times because I've had people go, well, I know what a resume is, but how is that different than a CV? Your CV is actually going to be more targeted to an opportunity than what your resume would be. So with your resume, you might put down things like your high school education, any past work experience that doesn't necessarily have to do with the medical field. But with your CV, you're actually going to go in and you're going to tailor it to that specific opportunity that you're applying for. So that is one of the big differences. Also, your CV typically tends to be about 2 to 3 pages, where a resume that can be 1 page, it can be 5, 6, however many pages. So with your CV, like I said, we're going to really be targeting that to that specific opportunity. So your CV realistically shouldn't really be more than 5 pages. Typically, I see a lot of CVs that are between 2 and 3 pages. 1 page, if you're fresh out of training and you don't have that work experience or those memberships or anything yet. But I have gotten CVs to review that have been 10, 13, 20 pages. That's getting a bit excessive. You have to remember that as you're writing your CV, even though, of course, as humans, we want to give as much information as possible, there are some things that can be left out because your CV is more than likely either going to be read by a person or they're going to scan it into a system where it's going to go through and it's going to do all the magic on the back end of reading through your CV to find those key points. If your CV is super duper long, if it's a person, they're going to dread looking at your CV, which we don't want them to be doing. We want them to be happy and pleasant while they're looking at it and not get a bad taste in their mouth before reviewing. But if it's a computer, you also don't want it to all of a sudden start skipping over things that you would want it to know. So make sure that we're not getting too lengthy with our CVs, and we'll go over some tips a little bit later on as well. So then that leads us to our final question. This is one that I get a lot is, well, what makes the CV strong? Your CV is going to be strong as long as you're making sure that you're putting that pertinent information in there and that you're leaving out that extra fluff or you're not going too off the walls of giving, a page description of a job description, because that job description should really be about 1 to 2 sentences, 3 at max, or into, a couple of bullet points. So it shouldn't be some big long description that it takes up a page or 2 pages. So we're really going to cover more during this webinar of what is going to consist of a strong CV. So if you have not created a CV before, I know it can be very overwhelming to think, well, what exactly do I need in a CV? Am I missing anything? So here are going to be kind of the backbone to your CV. Contact information. Make sure you put your name on your CV. Sounds silly, but I just had a CV given to me a few weeks ago. There was no name, there was no contact information, so I can't really do anything with that. And I'm just reviewing the CV. I'm not even going through to, try to hire this physician. But if I'm a hiring agency and I see, what, I have a physician or an advanced practitioner who decided, really don't need to put my name on here or my contact info, not going to, put them into a good spot for me. Probably going to put that one into my not interested pile. So make sure that you put contact information on there. And also, when you are putting that contact information, make sure it's contact information that you actually use or you check regularly. I'm sure that some of us still have a home phone that we got because it came with the cable, or, it's just my parents' home phone. I put it down for everything. Don't put that down if you're actively out there looking for job opportunities, because you may have a recruiter that contacts you, they call you, they leave you a few messages, you don't return them, and they think, you know what, not interested, I'm moving on to another candidate. So we don't want to be thrown into that boat. So just make sure that you're putting down contact information that you regularly use or that you regularly check. Also on your CV, you're going to put your education. So that education, that's going to include if you went on to get an MBA, PhD, but also your MD or DO, and then your undergraduate or MBBS. It does not need to have high school or here's some, or it doesn't need to have that high school or anything like that on there, just because they know that you went to high school. If you're a physician or an advanced practitioner at this point, you had to get through high school. So you actually just need to start from undergrad and then work your way up to what the most recent is. With your education, this is another thing that I see a lot of times. People will put too much information on that education part. You don't need to give the history of your university. You don't need to put down the address, the email, unless they ask for it. Some places will ask just because, hey, we want to check with them on your records, but a lot of them, they just want to know, where did you go? So make sure that you're putting that information on there. Also, with your education, you don't have to put, the month that you started. You don't have to say, I started in September 2010. I'm finished in July 2013. You can go ahead and you can just put the end year on there, but make sure that you are putting some sort of year, preferably that graduate year. With your experience, this is one where a lot of the younger residents and fellows kind of struggle with, because you may not have that work experience out there yet, which obviously if you've been in training, you have some experience in that clinical setting, but you haven't been working on your own most likely. So with this section, do not put down anything that is not medical related. I've seen people put, I was a baseball coach, I was a football coach, I worked at CVS, I worked at Target. That doesn't need to go on here. On your CV, we're focusing on that information that is relevant to that opportunity. So if you have research experience, or like I said, your training experience, put that on there. If you have some volunteer experience where maybe you helped go somewhere and administer shots or administer physicals, put that on there, but avoid things like, I was a coach back in 2002. Not super relevant, and it doesn't, it's not recent either. So go ahead, leave those off. Also, with your licenses and certifications, make sure that you're putting any license you have on there. You can put on your CV in parentheses also of active, inactive, training license, so you can put that information in there. So that way, if maybe you do have multiple licenses, but hey, I did my residency in Alabama, I worked there for a year, then I decided to go on to fellowship, so now I'm in Minnesota. you can put that you have an inactive Alabama license. Some places do like to see where you're licensed at because they may have multiple locations across different states. So sometimes they can use that to their advantage of, hey, we have a physician licensed in multiple states, or hey, we're going to pay for them to reactivate that license. Or the other reason why they want that on there is just to see where you've been licensed so they can look up your licenses to make sure that you don't have any medical malpractice or any sort of red flags that pop up when they look at you. Also, if you are going into any sort of academic role, you definitely want to make sure that you're including your research, your publications, your presentations. With that being said, I know especially the more seasoned physicians who have been around for a while, that can really build up. So like I mentioned before, where I said, yeah, I've seen those CVs that are 10, 13, 20 pages. A lot of times it comes from this because there are tons of publications, presentations out there. So with that, we want to make sure that if we're putting that information down, that we're not having 12 pages that are strictly just presentations that we've had. So actually go through and look at either the research and presentations that are the most relevant to the opportunity that you're applying for or the most recent. Keep the rest of that information in a separate in a separate document. So that way what you can do is you can actually send that over if requested. So if I'm only putting 5 of my research articles or 5 of my research projects on my CV, I'm going to put selected research. Just so that way they know too, hey, there's probably more here, especially if you have gaps in between. If I know that, hey, this is someone who specializes in this type of research, I'm going to make sure that I'm putting just that on here. Then they'll be able to see that as well. But make sure that you still have it in another document ready to go, just because you also don't want it to be that you say, yeah, I have these other, research articles, publications, presentations that I've done, and they go, okay, cool, can you send that over? And then you have to sit there and try to, hurry up and write out everything that you've done. So keep it in that separate document, just that way it's ready to go when needed. Also, if you have any awards, whether this be in medical school, residency, fellowship, if it happened to be something at the hospital that you're currently at, any sort of award or recognition, Dean's List, always good to put on your CV. This is just something that can help you stand out from a peer that may have a similar CV. Maybe you guys both went to a great program for residency. Maybe you both, have the same type of volunteer activities, research experience. So that can be something that just helps you stand out a little bit more. So make sure that you are putting that in there. And anytime you do list that you won an award, whether it be top resident, Daisy Award, scholarships, anything like that, make sure that you're putting the year that you won that. If you won multiples, list out those multiple years. But if I just say Dean's List, well, that could include undergrad, that could be medical school. So I want to make sure that I'm actually specifying when did I receive that. And then any volunteer experience. Obviously, as a physician, you are dealing with patients a lot. Organizations that are looking to hire you, they want to make sure that you're good with people. So if you have any sort of volunteer experience, like I said, maybe you went on submission trips, you helped do school physicals, you helped present at a local elementary school, high school, whatever, put that in there, just because, once again, going to help you stand out, and it's also going to help humanize you a little bit instead of just saying, this is another physician. So make sure that you're putting that information on there. On the flip side of that, if you don't have any volunteer experience, don't freak out. Don't think, oh my gosh, I've fallen behind or anything like that. You can still wow them with your CV. It doesn't come down to just that one thing. But make sure if you do have any volunteer experience that you're putting that on your CV as well. So the first CV example that we're going to look at is kind of a weak CV. So the reason why this is a weak CV is because whenever we get to that professional background section, you're going to notice that it's just a huge chunk of text. even in that bullet point format, still looks like a lot going on there. So even though the rest of the CV may look fine on here, as someone who's just looking at this to read, a lot going on. So make sure that as you're writing your CV, that you're keeping your job descriptions more to that second for Victory Memorial Hospital, where it's just 2 sentences. It's not multiples, it's just 2, it's not a paragraph. So make sure that you're keeping that nice and neat in there. Also, anytime that we have dates on our CV, especially for job opportunities, we want to make sure that we're also putting the month on that year. The reason why we want to do that is, number one, we want to make sure that everything on our CV is in reverse chronological order, but also we want to help out that organization as they start to look through our information. If we get hired on there, we're going to have to get credentialed. If those months aren't on there, all of a sudden we realize, yeah, I have no idea, I'm going to have to do some research for that. That can push back some of that credentialing time. So go ahead, put those months on your CV. Doesn't have to be a month and a day, just the month and the year will do great. So after looking at that CV, we talked a little bit about, avoiding those huge chunks of text, but also avoid that bad contact information. So not listing down an email address, or not listing down a phone number, or listing down one that we really don't use that often. Also, lengthy CVs. So like I mentioned before, sometimes our CVs can get a little bit lengthier if we have a lot of research or publications going on, but we want to try to avoid that. Try to keep your CV anywhere between 1 to 5 pages. Like I said, if it starts to go over that, 5-page mark, maybe that's whenever I cut back on my research and publications a little bit to just what is the most relevant to this opportunity. If I still feel like, I've gone through everything, I just can't get rid of it, maybe have someone else review it as well to say, hey, really don't need this in here. This description, kind of long. Why is it, 5 sentences? It can really be summarized down into 2. So avoid that. Also, you do not need to put your visa status or your birth location on your CV. I see this a lot from both U.S. citizens, J1 visas. So you just want to go ahead, leave that off of here. A lot of times on that application, it's going to let you put that on there. Also, same thing with the place of birth. Really don't need to put that on there. And then another thing that I see a lot, do not title your CV curriculum vitae. The recruiters that have been here, for a long time, they know it's a CV. The ones who haven't been here a long time, they also know it's a CV. You don't need to put that on there. It's just kind of a waste of space on your CV, which, especially if we're trying to, keep our CV down in page numbers and length, definitely want to not put something on there that's going to add to it. So go ahead, keep that off. Same thing if you write a cover letter, don't title it cover letter. And then avoid any non-relevant information. So this does not mean your hobbies or activities that you like to do outside of work, which are definitely fine to put on your CV, but this means things like writing an essay about, this is where I went to residency at, it's ranked blah, blah, blah in the country, I worked under Dr. So-and-so, and you're just putting a lot of information where they just want to know, where did you do your residency at? Same thing with the work experience. You don't have to put the full address on there and give a description of the hospital of it's ranked number 5 out of 100 on US Today's top hospitals. You don't need all that in there. For your job description on that opportunity, like I said before, 1 to 2 sentences of what you did there. Put your title that you had, the years that you were there, or the month and years that you were there, but then avoid that extra of we're ranked number 1 in the state and things like that. Does not need to be on there. Also, do not list your references. Do not put your references' names and contact information on your CV. Do not put references available upon request. If you're a candidate that they like, they're going to ask you for your references. There's nothing worse than having someone who you listed as a reference getting caught off guard going, who is this for? And then trying to remember who you are. or even if they do know who you are, trying to make sure that they don't get caught at a bad time. So make sure that you're not putting that on your CV, just so that way you can kind of give those people a heads up as well. Hey, just turned in my CV with this organization, or hey, I just got contacted for my letter or for my references. Be prepared to be contacted. But if you just submit it, sometimes they might read it that day, a few days. Doesn't really give you that that way to really give a heads up to whomever is your reference. So now to switch gears a little bit, here's a CV that I really like. The reason for that is that it's really easy to read. Everything's spaced out nicely to where I can see each section to find what I need to know. Also, it's not all squished together, and it's in an easy to read font, which is a big thing too. So with the CV, like I said before, full name and good contact information. If you have a name like Catherine or Michael, where you can shorten it down to Katie, Kat, Mike, whatever, make sure you're still putting your full name on your CV. The reason for that being is, with this day and age, we all like to, run a quick Google search, see what kind of pops up for people, check to see if they have a LinkedIn, all that kind of good stuff. So make sure that you're putting your full name down. Also, put page numbers on your CV. That is one thing this CV doesn't include, but by putting that page number of last name, page, that just helps that if for whatever reason your CV would get separated, they printed it out, kind of fell all over the place, you handed it to someone, all of a sudden, they unstapled it to scan into their system, whatever it may be, that's just going to save you from all of a sudden, oh, we thought we had all their pages, but apparently we're missing a few. So put those page numbers on there. Also, easy to read font size. Think of it this way: if you were given a document that you had to read to figure out, is this someone that I want to work with? If it's teeny tiny font that's really frustrating to read, you're not going to want to work with that person. So make sure that you're putting it, 10, 12 point font. Don't go crazy big with the 16 or 18, but just a nice, easy to read font size, as well as the font itself. Stay with the traditional, Arial, Cambria, Times New Roman. Don't try to get really cutesy with it and do the script or anything like that. That's going to make it more difficult to read. Also, with your font, I know it's really tempting whenever you're using Microsoft Word to try out the different templates, and this one has really fun colors. Some of the letters are in bright blue, some are in red. Make sure that they're able to read it. Print it off if you're unsure of, well, it looks fine on my computer screen, because there's nothing worse than sending off a CV and all of a sudden, oh, this didn't print out the way that I thought it would. Also, make sure you're being consistent. If your paragraphs are in a dark gray or anything like that, make sure it's consistent throughout the entire CV, but always make sure that it's easy to read through. And then same thing kind of off of that, consistent format. If your subtitles are bolded, all caps, underlined, anything like that, make sure that you're doing that throughout your entire CV. Don't just do it on page 1 and page 2. Do it throughout the entire document. If you're unsure, once again, print it off. Just double check that everything looks the same. Lay them side by side. But having that inconsistent format can just look sloppy, and it can look really weird to the eye whenever you're actually going through to read it. And then also, months on the dates. Like I said before, whenever it comes down to credentialing, they're going to need it. So have it on there. Also, this helps them kind of see, hey, was there any long gaps between opportunities? Because there's 12 months in a year. So if I end my job in January and I don't get a new one till November, that's a huge gap. So as a recruiter, if all of a sudden later on I find out, oh, you know what, they ended this opportunity in January, started the next one in November, why was there this gap here? Why did they not mention it? Were they trying to hide it? It just starts opening a can of worms that we don't need to have opened, especially if it was just a harmless, hey, I kind of forgot to put months on my CV, or I I didn't even know that I was supposed to put that on there. It just helps to avoid that. So make sure that you're including that on your CV as well. But let's go ahead, break this CV up a little bit more just to see each section by itself. So on this CV, they put down a professional summary. The professional summary is just kind of like a shortened cover letter. So with your cover letter, you're able to highlight your skills, the reasons why you want to work there. But with that professional summary, this is a way that we can, explain why we want to work there. Maybe we're compassionate, like this position. Maybe we have great work ethic. We're independent workers, whatever it is, we're able to put that in there. And then we can actually highlight or add in additional skills that we would want that recruiter to know about. So if I want to make sure that they know that I am specialized in that specific surgery, I'm going to put that in my professional summary so that way they can see it again. And if they see it multiple times, it's really going to stick with them. So make sure that if we are doing a professional summary, that we're highlighting those skills, but also don't do a professional summary and just put bullet points in there of, hey, here's all my skills. That summary should be anywhere between 1 to 3 sentences at the top of our CV. And this is just a way, once again, that we can highlight specific aspects of our skills or of ourselves. Also, this physician decided to do a skills section. I don't see these on a lot of CVs. I don't think it's completely necessary because if we're putting that in our professional summary, we don't need to come through and reiterate everything. But they did also put in here that they're fluent in Hindi. So if you do have any additional languages that you speak, go ahead and list that on here. And then say, are you fluent? Are you a native speaker? Are you intermediate? Do you know some basic? Put where your skill level is with that so that way they know. Don't assume, hey, you know what? I know kind of basic Mandarin or basic German, not going to get me too far. There are organizations, especially clients I've worked with in the past, that say, you know what? We're looking for a physician who specifically speaks this language. So if you can speak it, list it. If on the flip side of that, if you know 2 phrases in a foreign language, that doesn't count. Or if you know medical Spanish or medical sign language, put that on there, but make sure that you're putting that it's medical and not fluent or native or anything like that. With your work history and experience. So we're going to list out positions that we've held. So like this physician did, they put what their title was, the months and years that they worked there, the organization, and then they also went ahead and put the city, state that they worked at. So this is really nice because this lets that organization that you're applying to know where have you been in the past. And then also by putting it in reverse chronological order, they're able to see what was your most recent opportunity to your least recent. Because I have this conversation all the time. They may not care really what you did 10 years ago, but if you did something last year, they want to know about it. So they want to know about that most recent opportunity that you held because that can be more impactful than the last, the one you held 15 years ago. So make sure that you're putting everything in reverse chronological order. And then with your work history, we're going to put, that explanation of what we did. But if we have 15 past experiences because maybe we did some locums or moonlighting, I don't need to put a description for all 15. I'm just going to put a description for the 3 most recent opportunities. And then after that most recent 3, I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, okay, here was my title, the dates that I was there, the organization name, location, go on to the next one. So we don't have to continuously give out, descriptions for all of them to build up the length of that CV. Also, only list that relevant work history. So if you were a figure skating coach, you worked at CVS, you worked at Walmart, does not need to go on your CV. Go ahead, keep those off. Those are great, customer experience or teaching moments, but not relevant to medicine. With your education, like we talked about earlier, we're not listing anything prior to undergrad. And same thing like with the work experience, we're going to put our most recent to our least recent. So if you did go on after medical school and you got, and after you got, your MD or DO, if you went on to get that MBA, that's going to be listed first. You do not have to say, hey, here's, medical school first and foremost, because that's not going to be the most recent in that case. With your certifications and your licenses, this is something that I get a lot of questions on with, do I need to list out my license number? This physician did, which is great. You don't have to. If you don't feel comfortable having your license numbers out there, go ahead, leave them off. But be prepared to have that organization maybe reach out saying, hey, you know what, Dr. Smith, I'd love to see what is your Texas medical license number. Just want to look that up real quick. Also, on the certifications, you do not need to put your USMLE certification on here. They know that you've passed it, so go ahead, leave that off. So just to kind of wrap things up here, CV reminders. Target your CV specifically to that opportunity. So if I'm doing any sort of research or publications, anything like that, I'm making sure that it's relevant to that opportunity that I'm applying to. Put your months on your dates. Just helps keep out any confusion, helps to make you look like you're not trying to hide anything on purpose. Also, reverse chronological order for everything on your CV. Don't include those references. They'll reach out to you if you are a candidate that they're interested in and they want to see that. And then put those page numbers on there. Also, consistent style and format. Make sure, easiest thing to do, Control A, select your font again. If your font size is the same throughout, if you didn't make your titles bigger, anything like that, you can select both of those there. Make sure that all your font's black, just that way it's staying consistent throughout everything. And then anytime that you do submit an electronic copy of your CV, whether that be online, through email, make sure that you're submitting it as a PDF format. The reason why we want to do that is because it's inevitable that whatever version of Word that you have, someone's going to have a different version. They're going to have a later version. They're going to have an earlier version. So go ahead, save it as a PDF because it's going to be formatted the same no matter what version they have. But with Word, that can sometimes come into play for your formatting, and you don't want everything to get super messed up to the point where they're like, yeah, we can't even read this. What is this? So go ahead, submit it as as a CV, just to help avoid any formatting issues that can occur. But any questions over anything that we went over tonight? If so, you can throw them in that chat box. If not, you can also email them over to practicepath@practicematch.com. And we do offer free CV reviews. So if you have a CV that you'd like to get reviewed, you can email that over to us at any time, and we're happy to do that for you. But I will go ahead and I'll stay on the line for questions. But if you don't have any questions, thank you so much for attending, and I hope to see you at another webinar.